Craig O'Hare. I'm the Special Assistant for Clean Energy in the New Mexico Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department, and I'm from Santa Fe. Many of us feel that there's an urgency to climate change, that if we don't reduce our global greenhouse gas emissions, that we're going to find ourselves with a planet that's not nearly as habitable as what we've been able to enjoy during our lifetimes. And so I think that's probably the first and foremost reason, at least in my opinion, why our country as a component of this world needs to take that on. From an economic development and job creation standpoint, that essentially, our nation, our society has enjoyed the fruits of the fossil fuel era, and we've been able to take advantage of the fossil fuel era, but clearly, whether we're talking climate change or not, the fossil fuel era is coming to a close this century. We need to start the economic transition, if you will, from an energy economy standpoint, from the fossil fuel era into what we like to call the new energy economy, the sustainable economy, the clean economy. A lot of times people like to focus on, we've got 200 years of coal left and 90 years of oil left, and so we've got some time and things like that. But it was actually in talking about the fact that it's not really about how much of those fossil fuel resources are left. It was an Arab oil sheik back in the 1960s who said, we didn't move beyond the Stone Age because we ran out of stones. And so he went on to say basically that we're not going to move beyond the fossil fuel age after we've finally burned the last ton of coal and the last barrel of oil, but because we've moved on as a culture, if you will, into the sort of next generation of meeting our energy needs. Just like we did with telecommunication, the telegraph, went to the telephone to now we've got wireless everything. We're still basically, from an electric generation standpoint and a transportation standpoint, still back in many ways into the telegraph era. These are 100-year-old technologies that other parts of our society have progressed, and yet we still seem to be sort of locked into what I like to call last century's energy technologies. With an economics background, I think the major barrier is the externalities, the fact that energy resource extraction and utilization imposes costs on society that aren't included in the price that we pay at the pump or the price we pay at the electric meter. And those externalities are many, from a public health standpoint, from a resource scarcity standpoint. We're basically extracting natural resources and utilizing them. That's going to prevent future generations from being able to enjoy them. And climate change is also an externality. And so while people love to say, well, just let the market do its thing, the markets should be driving what we do with respect to energy, the problem is that there's so many imperfections in the market, what economists call externalities, that we can't just rely on the market to solve our problems. And so I would say that it really boils down to that. We could get into the power of certain energy industries and lobbyists and things like that, but ultimately it really gets down to the true costs of energy aren't being paid by the consumer because of these externalities that aren't included, and I think that's what keeps the market from being able to function the way it should in order to create the right outcome. Renewables get 90% of the focus, and renewables are great, and they're very sexy, wind turbines and solar farms and things like that, and they're very visible. But it's really energy efficiency that is the most cost effective. It gives you the best bang for the buck. And the neat thing about energy efficiency is that it will help basically pay for or offset the additional costs that these renewable energy sources are going to create on our consumers compared to coal-based electricity or oil-based transportation. That yes, these new, cleaner, sustainable forms of energy are more expensive than pulverizing coal and burning it in an electric power plant. To go into a building and do energy efficiency renovations and change out the lighting and change out the air conditioning system and put in more insulation, none of it's very visible, none of it's very tangible, whereas a photovoltaic system is very tangible. I think partly it's because our energy prices have been comparatively low. It hasn't been perceived to be having a great need for energy efficiency. But again, if we're going to be tackling climate change and we're going to be saying we need to have 50 or 60% of our energy supply coming from renewables, which I think over the long haul is at least the numbers we need to talk about, it's energy efficiency that's going to be essentially keeping all of our energy costs manageable. I mean, if as a result of switching to renewables and clean forms of energy means that prices go up by 20 or 30%, well, if through energy efficiency we can reduce our consumption by 30 or 40%, we're actually better off. We're actually spending less money on energy. It's not about, a lot of people like to focus on the cost of a gallon of gasoline or whatever, but that's only one component in how much do we spend on gasoline in a given year in our vehicles. I mean, the other two components, of course, is what's the fuel efficiency of that vehicle and how many thousands of miles do I drive. And so energy efficiency, even when we started seeing $4 gasoline, for a lot of people who were able to switch from a large SUV into, it doesn't have to be a hybrid, it could be a Honda Civic or a Ford Focus or whatever, they actually saw a reduction in their expenditures for gasoline. So energy efficiency, I like to think of it as sort of the black sheep in the family, if you will, or not. It seems to be forgotten. The other part about energy efficiency that's not mentioned a lot is economic competitiveness and business competitiveness, particularly internationally. An example is that in Japan, well, in the United States, it takes twice as much energy to produce $1 of gross domestic product, the indication of our economy's robustness, than it does in Japan. Japan can produce $1 of GDP with half the amount of energy that we do. And what does that mean with respect to a Toyota vehicle and what they can put out on the street for dollar per value or whatever versus a GM vehicle, if they're able to be so much more efficient with the energy they use in producing the services that energy provides. I mean, it's not about, there's been this misperception that to keep increasing our economy and making it vibrant, we need to continue to increase our energy usage, because in the past there has been a correlation between those two, but that's only been in some ways almost coincidental, because using energy is not what our economy needs. It's the services that energy provide are what our economy needs, and if we can be more efficient with it, we just clean up economically, clean up environmentally, and things like that. And the nice thing about energy efficiency and renewable energy is that I have a background in both earth sciences and natural resource economics, and I've always believed that over the long haul, a sound and robust and healthy economy and a sound and healthy sustainable environment are actually complementary. There's this myth that somehow we can only have one or the other and there's these trade-offs. And there's really no better demonstration of that myth than in this clean energy area. From renewable energy, here we are at a conference talking about job creation and in rural New Mexico. It's a great example of the fact that those two, the economics and the environment, are complementary and go hand in hand. In fact, I like to point out that the words, the eco in ecology and the eco in economics, actually come from the same Greek root word oikos, meaning home. And the great thing is we're seeing the younger generation get engaged, frankly. I'm a baby boomer, and the baby boomers have not been that engaged in this issue in a lot of ways. And so I think the main message to the younger generation is to get engaged, that this is their future, and the stakes are higher than they've ever been. They're higher than they've ever been economically as far as the job opportunities for the younger generation, and they're higher than they've ever been environmentally and globally. I mean, there are many of us that have a concern that the kids that are in high school right now, when they're in their 50s and 60s, are going to be dealing with a planet that's not nearly as enjoyable as the one we've been able to enjoy. So I think the main thing is to just get engaged, be involved, whether it's politically or just simply focus their education in areas that'll contribute toward and make them marketable as employees to the new energy economy. The link between the fact that we've got a dead construction industry right now, a commercial and residential construction industry is really hurting right now. The economy's in a really big slump because of all the foreclosures and the rest of the things going on with the economy. We're not seeing a lot of new home construction. We're not seeing a lot of new commercial building construction. And so we've got essentially a lot of plumbers and electricians and general contractors and sheetrockers and all those qualified construction trades that are unemployed, that are sitting home during the day. And we have the opportunity during this period and with our federal stimulus funds and things like that to make a link between the construction industry and how slow it is right now, and the need to go into the existing building stock, both the residential building stock, the homes, and the commercial building stock, strip malls, big box stores, office complexes, malls, and things like that, and keep the construction industry working by using this sort of slow period to go into the residential and commercial existing building stock and do these clean energy improvements. Go in and do an audit and then do full energy efficiency renovations and put photovoltaic systems or solar thermal systems on the roofs. And so there's a real opportunity to keep the construction trade industry working and at the same time addressing this climate change problem and the reality that our buildings currently, the ones that we have allowed to be built in the last 60 or 70 years, are very inefficient, and that there's opportunities to reduce their energy usage easily by 30 or 40%. And we've got a construction industry that's already familiar with buildings and how they work and how you work on them and things like that. And we can use this as a way to keep them working and solve a huge public policy issue at the same time. The fossil fuel industry during our country's last 120 years has been an enormous shot in the arm to rural and urban economies. I mean, because we've been pretty much a fossil fuel based energy economy, and this nation, as a result of being on the North American continent, has been blessed with an enormous amount of fossil fuel resources, that it's been a huge economic shot in the arm for the last 100 years. And so they've benefited incredibly, and that's the real challenge, is that to make this conversion, which we all see coming, we've got to figure out a way for the children of those baby boomers and others, if you will, that grew up in the oil patch or grew up in a coal extraction utilization environment, that we've got different sorts of jobs to offer their children, because whether you believe in climate change or not, fossil fuel resources are finite, and every indication is that most of them are going to be significantly played out by the end of the century. And we're seeing other countries position themselves much more aggressively than our country is. I think that's starting to change, but from the standpoint of the country's economic health, the majority of the companies that I deal with that are interested in renewable energy projects in New Mexico, wind, sun, geothermal, they are from out of this country. They are European, they are Asian, nothing against any of those regions, but as far as if we want to really focus on American-based companies, we haven't been seeing that because we haven't set up the sort of policy environment to really nurture startups and to encourage existing United States-based fossil fuel energy companies to branch out into some of these other clean energy areas. It's a different model, it's a different paradigm, and I think we need to realize that the way our economy and society was structured around the fossil fuel era, and the way state governments, particularly New Mexico state government, relied on a lot of revenue from that via the severance tax and things, that we're going to have to change sort of our approach to that. But we've been doing this as a society for a really long time, making these sort of major changes in our lifestyles and in our structure, whether it was going from the horse and buggy to the automobile or the telegraph to the wireless internet. It's all part of the fact that we, as a culture and a species, continue to improve ourselves and take our culture hopefully to the next level. Renewable energy is the energy of the future. It's not a fad. It's not some environmental hippie-based out of the garage sort of thing, although maybe 30 years ago it was something like that. This is the future of life on this planet, is renewable energy. Again, fossil fuel resources are finite. We're already starting to see the effects of depleting a finite resource. There's concerns about peak oil and when we reach that and things like that. And the notion that renewable energy is not strong enough or not widespread enough to meet our society's energy needs is completely bogus between wind and solar and geothermal. One thing I like to say is that for a single-story energy efficient building, and there's the key, is that it needs to be an energy efficient building, we can meet that building's entire energy needs from rooftop solar and rooftop solar thermal and or coupled with wind out in the yard, or and or coupled with ground coupled geothermal heat pumps. But that all of single-story buildings' needs could be met just with rooftop, which doesn't have anything to do with electric transmission lines and big power plants or things like that. Other statistics are that if you took about a 100-mile by 100-mile area, say in New Mexico's good solar country, that could meet about a third to a half of the entire nation's energy needs. So, I mean, people think, oh, the sun's just not quite strong enough, there's no way, and it's just not true. The amount of energy that falls on this planet from the sun in, I think, a day is more than this planet uses in a year. And it's just our ability as, bright humans to take advantage of that source and utilize it. What a lot of people don't realize with, say, a coal-fired electric power plant, and particularly a nuclear power plant, is that all either of those two power plants are doing is boiling water, making steam, and spinning a steam turbine. I mean, I didn't realize that until I got in this business. I thought something else was going on out there in that nuclear power plant west of Phoenix that I used to live somewhat nearby. And it's not. All they're doing in a nuclear power plant is boiling water and making steam. All the complicated things in a nuclear power plant and all of the costs are about controlling the uranium-238 and making sure it doesn't get out of control and, have a Chernobyl or whatever, things like that. And the sun, I mean, those of us who've played with magnifying glasses as a kid, and I know I did, it's really not that difficult to use mirrors to concentrate the sun's energy and boil water and make steam and spin the same steam turbine that a GE is selling to a nuclear power plant that would go into a solar thermal plant, which is what, of course, we've got going on in southern New Mexico in the near future.